Have you ever heard of a flight that took off but never landed? A ghost plane, forever trapped in the sky? Today, we're talking about the chilling mystery of Flight 237. Buckle up, because this story will send shivers down your spine. It was supposed to be a routine flight, a simple trip from London to New York. The weather was perfect, the mood was light, and Flight 237 departed right on time. On board were 5 friends: Dalmas, Henry, George, and Lucas. They were young, ambitious, and heading to a business conference they'd been looking forward to for months. None of them, not a single soul on that plane, could have imagined that this journey would become their last. The first few hours were completely normal. The cabin lights dimmed. Passengers settled in for the long haul, some dozing off, others watching movies. The steady hum of the engines was a comforting sound, lulling everyone into a sense of security. But then, just around midnight, everything changed. Turbulence hit, but this wasn't your usual bumpiness, the kind that lasts a few seconds and is quickly forgotten. This felt wrong. The plane wasn't just shaking, it was lurching violently, up and down, as if a giant hand was tossing it around in the sky. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Complete silence. The seatbelt sign flickered and died, plunging the cabin into an eerie quiet. Edward, who had a window seat, was the first to notice something was deeply wrong. He stared outside, but the clouds weren't moving. Not an inch. It was as if time itself had frozen, leaving the massive aircraft suspended in the dead of night. "What's happening?" he whispered to his friends, his voice barely audible. But no one had an answer. Just then, the cabin lights flickered back on. But something was missing. The flight attendants, who had been preparing for the night service, were gone. Their seats, once occupied, were now completely empty. A voice crackled through the intercom, and every passenger froze. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached cruising altitude. Please remain seated." The voice wasn't the captain's. It was slow, cold, and had a strange, disembodied echo, as if it was being broadcast directly inside their minds. A wave of unease rippled through the passengers. Thomas, trying to be brave, unbuckled his seatbelt and made his way to the cockpit. He had to know what was going on, but when he reached the front of the plane, he found the cockpit door swinging wide open. He peered inside, his heart pounding in his chest. What he saw made his blood run cold. There was no one there. No pilots, no co-pilots, just 2 empty seats, and the autopilot light blinking a menacing red. "There's no one here," he yelled back to the cabin, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and disbelief. As if on cue, the rear cabin door creaked open, even though no one was near it. A blast of frigid air rushed in, carrying with it a faint, terrifying whisper that seemed to slither down the aisle. "You shouldn't have boarded." And then, the true horror began. One by one, passengers started to vanish. Right from their seats. One moment, they were there, eyes wide with terror, and the next, they were gone. All that remained were their clothes, neatly folded on the seat, and a strange, sharp smell of ozone like the air after a lightning strike. Henry gripped his armrest, his knuckles white. "This can't be real," he muttered, trying to convince himself. "We have to be dreaming." Desperate for some sense of normalcy, he looked at the flight tracker on the screen in front of him. But what he saw was impossible. The map showed Flight 237 flying in a perfect, endless circle over the same patch of the Atlantic Ocean. The time displayed on the screen was frozen. 12:07 a.m. They were trapped in a loop. Suddenly, the power cut out completely. The cabin was plunged into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the faint, sinister glow of the red emergency lights. And in that terrifying red haze, Edward saw them. Figures were walking slowly down the aisle. They looked like the other passengers, but they weren't human anymore. Their faces were unnaturally pale. Their eyes were voids of black ink, and their movements were stiff, unnatural. One of them stopped right beside Edward's seat. It was the man he'd chatted with at the gate, but now his face was a grotesque mask. He smiled, a smile that stretched far too wide, revealing rows of teeth that weren't there before. "We never landed," the shadow figure whispered, its voice a dry rasp. "We've been flying for years." Panic finally exploded. People screamed. George and Lucas, in a desperate bid for escape, scrambled to the emergency exit. They wrenched the handle, and the door flew open. But outside, there was no sky, no clouds, no moon, just an endless, suffocating blackness of void that promised no escape. A deep, booming voice, the same cold voice from the intercom, filled the cabin one last time. "Flight 237 missing, since 1998. Welcome aboard." "Forever!" the friends screamed as the lights flickered violently, strobing between darkness and the horrifying red glow. And then, absolute silence. The next morning, air traffic controllers in Iceland made a bizarre discovery. Flight 237 was sitting perfectly on a remote runway. There was no sign of a crash, no damage, not even a scratch on its fuselage. It was as if it had been gently placed there. But when investigators boarded the silent plane, they found it completely empty. Every seat was vacant. There were no passengers, no crew, no boaties. The only things they found were 5 business cards, laid out neatly on a single tray table. On them were the names Edward, Thomas, Henry, George, and Lucas. Their phones, left behind on the seats, were still powered on. Each one had a single, chilling notification. A missed call from a contact named Captain Unknown. To this day, the disappearance of the people on Flight 237 remains one of aviation's greatest unsolved mysteries. But the story doesn't end there. Radar operators monitoring the North Atlantic still report occasional, fleeting blips. An unidentified aircraft, matching the exact transponder code of Flight 237, appearing out of nowhere just after midnight. It flies in perfect circles for a few minutes, a phantom in the sky, before vanishing as mysteriously as it appeared. The story of Flight 237 is a terrifying reminder of how fragile our reality is. We go about our lives, planning for the future, certain of our destinations. But what if one day, the journey itself is the destination? A journey with no end. It makes you think about how we live our lives. Are we appreciating every moment? It's a chilling thought that some flights, maybe, just never land. What do you think happened to Flight 237? Is it a time loop, a dimensional rift, or something else entirely? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this dive into the unknown, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more mysteries. Thanks for watching, and fly safe.